Okay, we are now live and recording. Welcome everyone to this month's episode of the Street Soccer Podcast. I'm Keith Mabbutt. I'm the founder and CEO of the Street Soccer Foundation, and I'm really pleased to be joined this morning by Dave Heffernan. He's an incredible supporter of the Street Soccer Foundation. He's become a friend and someone I greatly admire for reasons that hopefully we might touch upon during this conversation. Dave is a specialist provider of mental health solutions. He's a wellbeing coach, keynote speaker. And what I love about Dave is within his profile, actually online on his LinkedIn professional profile, there's a sentence there. And Dave, I'm sure you recognize this, but it literally just says, it all starts with a conversation. And I absolutely love that. And that's partly what, we'll look to achieve with this today. But it's also where Dave and I came into touch, when we first sort of opened up a dialogue, if you like. That conversation led on to Dave being an incredibly valued supporter of the foundation, to the extent of which he's actually taken time out of his diary to come and visit one of our sessions up in Liverpool, which is actually where I'm going to be later today, which is why I went red. But Dave, if I may, I'd like to bring you in at this junction, and if you can kindly just introduce yourself in your own words, and then we'll obviously start the interview. But over to you, sir. Love to see you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So my name's Dave, and my title is I'm an international coach, keynote speaker and company trainer, all centered around mental health and well-being. I work with children, schools, as well as corporates and community football clubs. And more recently, in the last year, I've been heavily involved in the UK and international beauty scene, which is a little bit of change of direction for me, but everybody's got mental health, so I can help anybody and everybody.
So you've just said there that you've sort of grabbed one of my questions, which was going to come a bit later, but I think why not address it now? So what you've just said there in terms of mental health, Dave, is maybe an obvious question due to the pandemic and everything else, but would you say it's fair to say that everybody has a responsibility for their mental health? Because there's statistics that I've become aware of that, one of the most recent ones I read that, 1 in 4 people have mental health issues. Me personally, I don't agree with that, because I see it as 1 in 1. I think everyone has got some form of mental health responsibility and will have some form of issue, whether it's on a scale of 1 to 10. Would you agree with that? And what's your personal views towards that?
Yeah, but also, everybody's got a breaking point. No matter how resilient you are, how strong and mentally and emotionally intelligent you are, everybody's got a breaking point. And the last year to 18 months has been hell for some people. Even the strongest of people are broke. But I've seen the last year and a half as being almost like a reset button, because we've been living our life on autopilot and never taking ourselves off the treadmill. And it's allowed us to sort of slow down and really appreciate what is truly important in life. Family, time to yourself, self-care, it's all been there, handed to you on a plate if you just open your eyes wide enough to see it. Personally, on a personal level, I've got through this lockdown with no issues at all, because I've always appreciated slowing down and being mindful and being appreciative of the little things. And there's a saying that I love. I can't think of who the quote is, but there's 2 statements, and one's false, and it's, when I'm happy, things will change. When things change, I'll be happy. And it's true. When I'm happy, things will change. And too many people over the last year have been saying, oh, when lockdown ends, I'll be happy, I'll be content. Oh, when this happens, I'll be happy. No, we've got a personal responsibility to be content and appreciate what we've got now, because the future's not arrived yet. And the past is only serving us to be depressed. Stay in the middle, stay in the present, appreciate what you've got, the family around you, the loved ones, the time, people have noticed that they've got woodland down the end of the road, and they've been living there for 10, 15 years, and they've only just realized, because they've had the time to slow down and explore, because they've appreciated that hour that they've had to exercise. So they've took it full advantage. So yeah, this lockdown has been a great opportunity to reset and actually truly focus on what's important. I think the vast majority of people appreciate that now.
I think with what you're saying there, you're clearly someone who's had some form of foundation to really draw on a lot of strength within and I guess that comes from your education, your learning, your knowledge, your skill set. Do you mind me sort of taking you back a little bit, Dave? So just for the benefit of those that are watching this, you know, and you know, it's a broad audience that I shared with you. I know you were born in Salford, so literally take you right back. I won't say how many years, mate. I'm not that harsh, but but no, born in Salford. But do you mind sort of just touching on sort of your general kind of upbringing, Dave? What was it like? You know, was it a happy kind of upbringing? You know, did you have a lot of people around you, lots of family or friends, or the opposite? Or how did you get on for sort of those teenage years?
Yeah, the thing is when you grow up I grew up in one of the roughest council estates in Europe. It was actually a Channel 4 documentary in 1992 during the Salford riots, where it said it was the roughest council estate in Europe. And it was a place called Odsal, which bordered Salford Docks. And I feel myself so fortunate to have remembered Salford Docks as they were and not as they are now as Salford Quays.
Yeah.
And as a 5-year-old, I used to go across Trafford Road, a huge road, on my own, and I'd just sit by the dock office watching the ships and the workers coming in. And I learned quite a fair bit of language that, you know, it shouldn't be learned as a 5-year-old. But it was my first sort of understanding of mindfulness, because I just lose myself. I just sit there watching the ships coming in, watching the workers go about the business, and I just lose myself and I just be in the moment. And it was fantastic. About 5 years old, I was told that I was going to be an altar boy because I was quite good at reading. And I remember the first day the priest came over and he took me by the hand and took me to the church. And he sat me down and said, "Dave, we're going to be serving a funeral tomorrow and you're going to be serving on the altar with us." Now, at 5 years old, serving a funeral, you know, Ofsted would be involved now, social services would be involved. But my very first experience as a 5-year-old in school was at this church with the coffin in front of me, which was taller than me. I looked like the Milky Bar Kid. He had beautiful blonde hair, national health glasses, about yay high. And there was about 120, 130 grieving people in front of me as a 5-year-old. Now, you know, people could have broke at that point. You know, that could have really damaged me throughout the whole of my life. But I just saw it as my world. You know, I knew no different. You know, I had no expectations out of the way. So I was just told, this is what you need to do. So I got on with it. And between the age of 5 and 8, I'd served over 400 funerals, which is not normal. And I remember at 8 years old, out of nowhere, adults would sit next to me and just pour the heart out in the church. Wow. And obviously I couldn't offer advice as an 8-year-old, but what I could do was listen. And I always say there's a positive and a learning curve in every experience we go through. No matter how traumatic, how deep it is, there's always a positive and a learning curve. It's just we seem to go for the negative and we fester on that.
Yeah.
And so I remember asking the priest, because all I kept on hearing was, I wish I, or I wish they. I wish I would have spent more time with the person before they died. I wish they would have lived the life they wanted to live. I wish I wouldn't have argued, etc., etc. And that terrified me. As an 8-year-old, that would really terrified me. And I went to the priest and I asked him the question, said, how do I live a life of no regret? Now, I've got a 10-year-old and he just wants to know how he gets V-Bucks on his Fortnite account. You know what I mean? He doesn't want to know about that sort of philosophical stuff. And rather than, I'm so grateful because over the years, there's been sliding doors moment where adults, and this is why I love the Street Soccer Foundation so much, adults have took me to the side and treated me with the respect I deserved and led me down a path that was the right path. And the priest turned around to me and said, rather than slap me and say, go away, he sat me down and said, Dave, to live a life of no regret, you need to make peace with your decisions, both good and bad, immediately. And I remember walking out of that church at 8 years old, and it was like my mind had just exploded. I thought, I am never going to have a single regret. I am going to make peace with everything. Now, as you know, I've had decisions which have took me into really precarious positions where I've had death threats and been beaten up in very absolutely shockingly crap decisions. Yeah. But because of that advice as an 8-year-old, I was able to make peace with them and move forward. You know, and I feel myself so blessed to have had that level of education at such an early age. And, you know, I've helped several thousand people over the years who've been suicidal, who've been really, really low. And it all starts with listening actively without judgment. And that was all learned from being an 8-year-old.
this is astonishing. I mean, I didn't know about the 5-year-old angle leading up to the 8-year-old, as it were. I mean, it's incredible for me on a personal level, because I think you know anyway, but I've got a little boy who's sort of 4, recently turned 4. So to think of him in a year's time doing what you've just described is absolutely, like you say, mind blowing. I mean, it is exactly that. But I mean, therein lies the fact that what an incredibly unique grounding. I mean, like you say, an 8-year-old, you've got adults taking counsel with you, and then you're asking just the most amazing question of a priest at 8 years old, you know, to live a life with no regret. I mean, I totally agree with you. I don't know any 8-year-old that most people around me, like at a younger age, that would come out with such a profound question, and then, you know, seek out that sort of drive once you've got that knowledge of therefore any decision you make, you're immediately at peace with it. So therefore there's no regret, full stop. I mean, going into your sort of later years, you know, sort of moving into your 20s or whatever, but I mean, where did it start for you in terms of work, you know, and obviously, you know, we've all got to live and get by and earn, whether it's you generate your own cash or you work for someone else, or how did you make your way, mate? What was the first sort of step for you?
My first step wasn't actually making money. I had a strong moral compass because of where I grew up. I recognized that there was a lot of children, a lot of boys especially, who didn't have the best role models. You know, their Uncle Keith was the local armed robber, and, you know, Uncle Bob was the local thief or whatever, drug dealer. And I just wanted a safe space for those kids to be able to go and just be themselves for a couple of hours, whether that was to do homework or just to get away from those influences, to be inspired and to help. And so from about 14, I started looking around and saying to my dad that I wanted to develop a childcare club when I left school, on a sort of voluntary community basis. My dad didn't agree. He wanted to become an accountant. And it all kicked off at 16 when he'd found me an internship in London at this accountancy firm. And I told him, "Have you not been listening for the last couple of years? You know, I want to do this." And I was so set on it. No plan B. It was that or nothing. And so ultimately I got thrown out of the house and I became homeless. And my first night at 16 years old was spent in a brick bin shed. And it was absolutely 11 o'clock at night in November. It was absolutely chucking it down. And the pubs were kicking out. And I was terrified. I was under this bin shed with cobwebs and what have you. And when I got up in the morning and got out of that bin shed, a resolve had built up inside of me. I thought I could go back now and say, "I'm sorry, I'll become an accountant." But then what's the point of the last 2 years? What's the point of me being thrown out of the house? Now I've been given an opportunity to just fly and go for it. So for the next year, I had no plan B, and I was just knocking on. It was around the time Solver Keys offices were being built and developed, and I was knocking on doors just asking for money for this childcare club. And I went to Salford Council probably about 3 times, no joy. And I must have had about over 1,000 rejections because I was nearly 17 years old. I'd still in the same clothes I've been wearing for several months. I was seriously malnourished. I'd been to hospital previously to that, swallowing my tongue and seriously underweight. But I just had this vision that I wanted to get this childcare club. And it was one chance meeting at the council when I went for the 4th time. There was a guy there who was doing YTS sign-ups, the old youth training scheme sign-ups. And he asked me, would I be interested? I said, no. I said, I wanted to get this childcare club. And I explained to him what I wanted. And he said, have you got a business plan? I said, I won't have a clue what you're talking about. I said, what about strategy, marketing strategy? Well, you know, I have no idea. I've just got passion and I just want to get it up. And again, just like the priest, he took me to the side and he bought me 2 suits and he paid for a haircut. And he said, I'm going to work with you the next month to get this plan in action so you can go back to these people and convince them that this is what is needed for this area. And he did. And the first, I think about 20, 25 people I went back to, I got enough money to set the childcare club up. Now, at that point, I was emotionally and physically spent. I was gone. I was seriously underweight. I'd given it everything. So I handed the keys over to Salford Council. And they didn't have my passion or my why. They was more interested in the money coming in from Salford Keys and the housing. And ran into the ground within less than 2 months. And this ties in with what I was talking about before about making peace, because my goal was to get it up and running. It wasn't to run it. It wasn't to be the manager or the caretaker or whatever. It was to get up and running, believing there was people out there who were better equipped to take it forward. And the very fact that they didn't, I couldn't waste time on being bitter or angry. I had to make peace with the fact that I'd done as much as I could. I put all my effort into it, and I achieved that goal of what. But that led me then to a life of just doing 30 odd years worth of voluntary stuff. And so I've never really been driven by money. My first proper job was in a care home. Whilst I was homeless, I was living in a cemetery at the time for 3 months. And I got a job in Broughton, it was. And they knew my circumstances. So because it was night, said, as long as you get people to bed and sorted, you can just do whatever you want to do for the night, sleep, do whatever. But my job, the downside of it was when people unfortunately died, I had to take care of the body. I was waiting for the undertakers to come in, because they knew about my situation with, there's thousands of funerals that served and whatever, so I knew that I could. But, nobody ever died at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was always 3 o'clock in the morning when it was pitch black and it was scary. Yeah. But I remember one person who died, and I was getting her prepared and she was late, and I was stood right in sort of the middle of her, and out of nowhere she just sat up. Now this was somebody who was dead. And
Jesus,
I heard after this that people sort of can release the gases and make noises and what have you. But she literally just sat up, and I'm there sort of face to face with this dead woman. And I legged it out of that room to the matron, and she was piddling herself laughing. I said, "Oh no, this can happen. I should have told you that really." I said, "Yeah, it would have been nice." You don't really want people doing sit-ups while you're not expecting them to. So that was my first paid job. And then soon after that, a bit like the army, I was getting claustrophobic. I'd been arrested. There's so much going on, but at 18, I'd lived in a homeless hostel in Salford, in a flat where I shared with a low-level drug dealer, thief, and an armed robber, and that was my sort of people. And I talk a lot about prejudging and not to prejudge, because we've all got a story. And so I took it upon myself to get to know these people, because I had to live with them. So there's no point in me hiding away. And they used to call me straight Ed because I never drink to excess and I never take drugs or anything like that. So they respected me for that. But I listened without judgment. And some of the horror stories that they'd gone through, where they didn't have my grounding, they didn't have that fortunate sliding doors moment, they went in a different path. And so I got a job telemarketing, and I lasted 2 days because I hated it with a passion. I didn't make a single sale. And it was before the old auto dial-up days. So I just used to press a number and pretend to talk. And that's a skill in itself. When you're trying to sell to nobody on the phone, but make it look as if you are selling to somebody who's in the room, that's a skill in itself. That's an art form. And I think I phoned for a pizza once, and I phoned my brother. And I got sacked because I'd never made a sale on him. Anyway, about a week later, I went in for my wages, which is embarrassing because I was never going to get paid. And I remember I did a sitting, cross-legged like Buddha. I was I'm not moving until I get money. Anyway, it was embarrassing because the security picked me up by my elbows and carried me out, and I'm there screaming. But I made the fatal mistake of saying, I'm going to see this place go up in smoke. Meaning I'm going to take you to court for the money. Yeah. A couple of weeks later, I got a knock on the door, and Salford CID knocked on, and I was charged with arson. The place had actually gone up in smoke. So I was actually facing 7.5 years in prison as an 18-year-old for arson, not understanding how it had happened. Luckily, there was no major damage to the property. And so I was answering bail for about 4 months. And I talk a lot. People say, oh, your story is, my story is boring compared to yours. But everything that I went through, it was fear, anxiety, stress, low thoughts. It was adult thoughts, because I thought I can't handle prison. But I genuinely couldn't see a way out of getting me out of it.
Yeah.
And on the 4th time of answering bail, the officer said, you can go, you've been cleared. I said, well, I need a bit more than that, because, you just ruined my life here. And it turned out to be the low-level thief who had done it on my behalf, because I'd gone back that night, shared my story, what had happened. And because they respected me, and that was the way they dealt with it, as being loyal, without telling me that, they went in and stole a few computers and tried to burn it down on my behalf. Jeez. Now, I went to the court case because he went to the police, and as soon as he heard that I'd been charged with it, he went to the police station and he confessed, and he said his words were, "I cannot handle somebody so straight going down for something he didn't do. I confess." And he got 7 years for it. Now, I go back to the old counsel who were there to safeguard the children's future, who didn't want to know. Yet the scum, people who look down upon and say, you don't belong in this society, they stood up and was counted, because I treated them with respect and didn't prejudge them.
Yeah.
If I would have looked at them and said, you know what, you're not my people, not interested, he wouldn't have done that for me. I would have fried.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, there's a great story about not everybody's got a story.
Yeah.
And I always say, whenever somebody's being a bit of an idiot to me or being trolly on Facebook, I always ask them what your story is. So you've got a story, something's happened. If they want to tell me, great, we can help. If they don't want to tell me, at least I've not added oxygen to that fire.
Is that Dave? Is that how you would typically, like in your current work that you do now? Is that how you would typically approach that first discussion, conversation with someone? Because I would imagine that people who come to you, that's probably, is it fair to say that's a massive deal for them already, just literally by reaching out to you in the first place, because of the state of mind that they're in or circumstances that they're in, and how, is it often in so many words that you almost sort of, praising them for reaching out and then driving that first discussion around what you've just said? Yeah,
it needs to be totally acknowledged. If somebody's coming to you for help, it may well be that they've had this issue for years, or they may be carrying 20, 30 years of baggage with them, and I call myself the chief donut maker. I keep it simple and say, look, my job is to extract the molded jam from your donut, which is your brain, and to allow that space to be created for beautiful custard to be right back in. You know what I mean? But until we get that molded jam out, we can't do anything. So I'm here to listen without judgment. And I share a little bit of my story because then it makes them realize that nothing's going to shock me. I've been through it. I understand what suicidal thoughts are because there was a time when I was suicidal. I understand what real fear is because I've been fearful. I've had death threats and various other things. So they need to understand that I'm not going to judge them. No matter what they come out with, this face is going to remain unshocked, and that's so important because so many of us are well-meaning and we want to try and save them by giving them strategies and options but the best way to save somebody is just to be there for them. Yeah. And just allow them that safe space and to let them know there is a safe space without judgment when they're ready, because you can't drag a horse to water if they're not ready to share. And the best way to make them ready and to help them be ready is to let them know that you're there without judgment. Well, what's hit me just there, though, as you're saying that, Dave, is just you on a personal level, if you don't mind me saying, like, for you and what you've gone through and come through. I know you've mentioned the priest a couple of times, and the guy in that council that on the YT scheme, and he gave the opportunity of some suits and a haircut and stuff. So there's been occasional individuals there, but when you've had extreme challenges and scenarios, how have you, where is your outlet? Because we're talking now, we touched upon briefly there that someone in a situation, they've got, say, you to reach out to, and you can absolutely help them, and you do. But then for you yourself, how have you come through this? How have you, you've obviously educated yourself, but how have you actually done that to get to a point where you're now able to help other people? Yeah, well, this goes against every bit of advice I give to people. I rarely offload. Because of everything that I've been through. I know, just by retreating and just being alone is enough for me, just to slow the mind down and bring it right into the room. I'm a big fan of mindfulness. When I was about 21, I think it was, a bit like the army, when you come out into civilian street, I was getting claustrophobic. I had a normal job, I had a house, and I was getting claustrophobic. The four walls felt like they was closing in because I had 2 years on the street, you know what I mean? And so I couldn't cope. And so I got a train ticket to Oxenholme in the Lake District and then into Windermere. And I bought a tent thinking, if I'm going to be homeless, I'd rather be homeless somewhere nice rather than in Manchester City Centre. And I got talking to a local farmer in the pub on the first night, and I told him a story. And this is the thing about people love stories, you know what I mean? And if you share a story, people get drawn in and they feel, you know, they can open up with their own story. And I got talking to this farmer and I told him what my plans were. And he actually turned around to me and said, you can have a corner plot on my field. Just pitch your tent in the corner. You know, don't mind the cows and everything else. Just do your own thing. Whatever you catch is yours. Happy days. And I said, I've never caught anything but a cold. You know, I don't understand. And he actually taught me how to catch wildlife and what berries to eat and what plants you could eat and all that sort of stuff. So for pretty much 4 seasons, for nearly a year, I lived in this tent in the middle of a field with just a fire for company. I had bacon butty and went out into, you know, did walks for miles and miles and miles. But it made me realize very quickly, you know, when you're looking up at the night sky, and I saw some incredible sights when there's no light pollution in the middle of the Lake District, saw some incredible shows. You realize just how insignificant we are in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. And it was a real sort of humbling experience. And when I came back to normality, I appreciated, you know what, the same crap was still going on. There was still war, there was still homelessness, still poverty, still crime, still whatever. Yet I'd changed. My perspective, my tolerance levels changed. And so from a very basic level, all I can do and all anybody can do is impact on their immediate world around them. So if I'm walking down the street on say morning, if I'm in the car, I'll let people out at the junction, because guaranteed, if you let that person out at the junction, when you go to the next junction, they'll let the next person out. If you give them the V sign and start getting all angry and road rage, guaranteed that person's day will be impacted negatively and it will just be a ripple effect. So without even realizing it or knowing it, you've impacted on probably 200 people that day, but you only know about the 1 or 2 that you've impacted immediately. You know, and that's the way I live my life every single day, is I make sure that I impact on those around me in a positive way, because I know the ripple effect will be 200-300 people down the road.
That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing what you just shared there, and on you know, just what you've said there to do the ripple effect. That's if you don't mind me saying, that's absolutely, we're so aligned with that, Dave, you and I, that with what we do, obviously, as you know, and you've seen it at first hand level. That even yesterday, I'll share very, very briefly, but just yesterday I was up at one of our different programs, Leicester City Street Soccer Academy, and this young guy came off the pitch and he said to me, Keith, at the end there, I was getting really frustrated and sort of angry. Is that normal? And I said, well, what do you mean, is that normal? What is normal? And he said, well, just because I was getting really frustrated, and I could sense myself getting really angry at this. And I said, what was you getting angry at? And basically, through a conversation, ultimately, it was because he wasn't receiving the ball towards the end from this player that had his head down and wasn't really looking up. And then he was finding positions. So I flipped it, and just in that one discussion, flipped it by saying, you know, he was finding the right positions, he was calling out. I said, what you could do maybe is educate your teammate. So rather than get frustrated at the situation for yourself, actually, you've done nothing wrong. Actually, if you think about it in black and white terms, you've done nothing wrong whatsoever. You've called out, you've found a great position, you're there for your teammate. You know, your frustration is that you not receive the ball. So help your teammate, because he's got his head down, he can't see you, so he doesn't know where to lay the ball off. And then again, within that, it then went on to a next level by saying, well, what he could then do to improve his performance. And then in terms of how he approaches his mornings. And it was literally in the space of a 5-10 minute chat, we touched upon that ripple effect, as in his girlfriend had come down to watch him. And I said, you know, you can have an impact on your girlfriend in the way you approach your day, and you can help each other. And then the people around you, and I said, your teammates, you're going to reach out and help your teammate. And then that person will then, and like exactly what you just said about giving way to somebody who then would no doubt give way to the next person. I said, how do you think your teammate will feel if you're putting a virtual arm around him, helping him and educating him? He's going to be more inclined to do the same with another teammate.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what you said. And that's why I had to share that with you, because as you were saying that, I was smiling in my mind. I had to I can't believe that the perfect relation to what I went through myself just yesterday with someone. And you're so right. And in the nature of that, our goal is exactly that. We bring groups of these young people together. They're small numbers for a reason, because you want to make a real impact. But then that one person, it's exactly that it's their immediate circle around them can be positively impacted. It's not only them, the people around them, and then it's a layered kind of ripple effect, like exactly what you said. So actually a group of 10 suddenly can easily become 100, because they go and tell 10 people each there's 100 people. So the work that you do is incredible, Dave. I mean, obviously, I mean, I could talk for the rest of the day with you. I mean, I genuinely can. I mean, some of the stuff you like, and it's light touch, and there's so much in there. My God, and I know for a fact, I'm certain some of our supporters community who will come across this, I'm certain they're going to want to reach out to you, and I really will encourage them to do that. But just in terms of kind of you now and looking ahead, what have you got planned? I mean, and actually, do you mind me asking? I mean, you mentioned earlier that you've come through this pandemic with kind of no problem whatsoever. Do you mind kind of just sharing two things? One, your immediate kind of next steps and what you've got planned over the coming sort of 6-12 months, but also, as we all together as a country come out of this pandemic gradually, slowly but surely, hopefully, fingers crossed, can you give some comfort or some insight into those that have actually really struggled and found things really tough, and they're not quite sure of a tomorrow, in the sense of, what the hell does this look like for me as a future? Because I don't know whether I've got one now. I don't know, because I may have lost my job, I may have lost my career, I may have lost a family member, whatever it might be, because it's been very tough, as you sensitively mentioned that very kindly, that it's been tough for a lot of people. You yourself have come through it fine. But if you don't mind sharing a bit on that as well, just to sort of help some others as well, that'd be really grateful.
Yeah, so the immediate term for me, as I say, I'm heavily involved in, for some strange reason, my wife's a nail tech, so that's how I managed to get involved in it. But I'm sort of the go-to well-being expert for the UK nail and beauty industry, which is, before that I was working with rugby and football, from big burly rugby players and football players to nail techs and beauticians. So I've got some really exciting projects for that. But also, pre-pandemic, we'd developed a program for grassroots sport football, and we were due an audience with the FA to look at piloting this program called Tackling Mad. But I've also created programs for mental health within sports coaches as well, because we always, and rightly so, we always talk about the kids and, they need support. But when you're looking at schools and when you're looking at coaches, they need support as well. They need support as well. And, in schools, primary school teachers, I think it's something like, it's double the national average for suicides amongst primary school teachers. So when you're thinking the stressed are leading the stressed, I mean, we've not got a good outcome there. And it's the same with coaches. They doing this for the love of the sport and to help the kids. And the pandemic has really put the crap amongst it all, because while they're doing it for voluntary and for the right reasons, all of a sudden that outlet for themselves was taken away when the community grassroots was taken away. So they've suffered massively, over the pandemic, because they've not been able to have that outlet. They go 2-3 nights a week doing the training and coaching. That was then taken away from them. And they're like, well, what do we do now? I'm trying to help the kids. I'm trying to help myself. So I've developed a program for coaches within grassroots football and sports, which I'm really excited about launching properly. I spoke with the regional FAs and what have you, and there's been some good signs going forward. In order for people to move forward with this, I live by several rules in my life, which has served me well for quite a number of years. First one is control the controllables. Is straight away, Jim Rohn, a great philosopher of our time, once said, after every recession, there's growth, and after the darkest hour, there's glorious sunrise. It's the law. So whenever I go through a tough time and an adverse moment, I almost get excited, because I know if I can look at the positives and look at the learning curves and control the controllables and not expand any energy whatsoever on the stuff that's outside of our control, then I know there's something really good waiting for me, some growth waiting for me at the end of it. So it's almost ingrained in me now. Whenever there's tough times going ahead, because we've been up and down. We're now talking about a Thai variant. We've gone from Indian variant, Kent variant to Thai variant. People's minds are all over the show.
Yeah.
And anxiety lives in the future. What if? And depression lives in the past. Let's get ourselves back into the room, back into the moment. Because that's all that's real at this moment in time. That's all we've got. Tomorrow never comes, because when tomorrow comes, it's today. So let's focus on now. What can we positively impact on our day? So I always wake up in the morning and I always think about somebody else. I don't think about myself. I think, right, let's do something for somebody else. So I might write a review on Facebook for somebody, or I might give my kids a hug, or whatever it may be, but it's always about somebody else, because we've got such a purpose in life that we can inspire so many others. When people are going through our time, that's got to be a story for somebody to be inspired from, ultimately, because we've all pretty much got 100% record of getting through this pandemic. And so now we can sort of plan. But the controllables is a huge one, because there's no point in wasting energy on the stuff that's outside of our control, because you're not going to be able to change it. Look at the positives, look at the learning curves. In some of the most horrific moments of time that I've had, I've been able to pinpoint where the positives in the learning growth and the learning curve has come from. And I look back and say, yeah, made sense. I can see how that's now positively impacted on me.
Yeah.
They're the three, I would say. If you can get a handle on those, life will be good. And also that I was saying before, when things change, I'll be happy. Cut that out, change that language to when I'm happy, things will change, because we've still got a choice. Whether we wake up in the morning and actually say, it's raining, but at least the bees and the plants are happy. Or, I'm going to get soaked. Well, we've got umbrellas, we've got coats. So there's always a way of looking at, but by doing the controllables and the learning curve and the positive, it will put you in good stead.
That's amazing advice, and in that regard, actually, it aligns again with one of our kind of core beliefs at the foundation, that it's about, actually, in terms of that change element, it's change your mindset. Actually, if you change your mindset, that's where you can obviously change your future. And so rather than the kind of environment around you waiting for that to change will therefore make you happy, that's not it at all. You change up here first, and how you perceive things and view things, and how you see yourself and others. And the fact that you've got that ability to wake up and immediately think of someone else or others, that's the gratitude play, and that sort of serving of others, that you don't even look for it, because that's not in the nature of why you're doing that, but often it comes back anyway. So then you get that reward, because it's like, if you thought of me and you picked up the phone to me, or you wrote something nice about me or the Street Soccer Foundation, I will come across that. Either if it's a phone, it'll be instantaneous. If it's a written review, like you mentioned, I'll come across that. And when I come across that, how do you think I'm going to react to it? Yeah. When I see it and I read it, it's going to instantly impact me in a good way, and it's going to make me feel great and like empowered, and give me another sort of keep going and drive it. Because life's hard, isn't it? Life is difficult, and it has its ups and downs. But actually, when someone else can kind of lean on you and say, look, do you know what, I'm here for you, or I support you, or you're doing great, or you can do this, and it's that positive influence is what you've touched upon there as well. That kind of, you said about it earlier, that so often people get drawn by the negative aspect, and they hone in on that negativity, and that then just automatically draws them down. Actually, if you can flip that and look for the positives in a situation, which I know can be challenging, and I know it really is challenging for many people, but it starts within, and it starts with how you look and feel and think about things. So the advice is absolutely amazing there, Dave. And like you say, control the controllables. Things that are outside of your control, don't sweat it. Because there is a 0 point. And I will say that what you just said there was a sentence that you just said there, which I'm absolutely going to take away. I mean, there's lots I'm going to take away from this call, but anxiety lives in the future is one in which, what if, what if so-and-so happens, whatever. That's a really profound sentence there. And for the fact that, again, this week, I've been touring the country this week, looking at our various academies up and running, and there's a few of them that, these young people that are really suffering with anxiety, and that's such a powerful statement to have. So I'm going to, if you don't mind, with your blessing, grab hold of that and use that in my kind of comfort and counsel with some of these. And I know it's going to help them. But Dave, it's been an incredible pleasure to speak. I can't believe we've run out of, well, we've overrun, but I knew it would happen anyway. I mean, I said to you before we started live, didn't I? I said, like, I'm a nightmare because I talk forever, but what you've said is there's so much context there, and there's so much that you could expand upon, and I know that.
Yeah.
But it's a taster, and it's a brief insight into the most incredible man that you are, and it's a sincere privilege to speak with you. And I genuinely, I've learned more things about you in this call today than what I knew, and you're just an amazing man, honestly, mate. And I've got so much respect and gratitude for you, and your ongoing support of the foundation is hugely appreciated. And you as an individual, you know, what you've touched upon there for the future, you know, I'll certainly look to see where we might be able to sort of plug you in, for want of a better phrase, in what we're doing as well. So but no, Dave, it's been a privilege, and thank you so much for your time. How can people get hold of you, Dave, in terms of those that have obviously watched this and come aware of it? How can they get in touch with you directly?
LinkedIn is probably best, which is Dave Heffernan Speaker, on my website, which is daveheffernan.com.
Perfect. Well, we'll make sure we put that on them when we post this live. But yeah, Dave, thank you. So it's daveheffernan.com. Everyone, I'm sure once you come across this or watch this, you know what an amazing man Dave Heffernan is. Specialist provider of mental health solutions, wellbeing coach, keynote speaker, frankly, you know, a mental health guru, and what a past to draw strength and resilience and experience from, for those people that could do with a little bit of support and help. And you know, I think most of us can these days. You know, we've got a lot going on. The world is a tough place right now. So you know, David, thank you again. It's been a great privilege. This has been the Street Soccer United podcast. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. It's been an amazing discussion. This will be live later on this afternoon. It's pre-recorded, but we'll make sure this goes live across our socials, and we'll be sharing that. And I look forward to the young people watching it as well and getting their feedback. But Dave, once again, thanks for your time. See you soon, mate.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.